They had stopped calling for help. The SEAL team was trapped in a canyon that swallowed sound and hope alike. 5 men against an army they could not see, pinned behind a ridge of fractured stone. Ammunition was down to half magazines, radios bleeding static. Every channel was a graveyard of broken voices. Lieutenant Mark Hensley crouched in the dirt, headset pressed to his ear. "Raven Actual, this is Viper 1, do you copy?" Only static answered, thin and cold. He exhaled through dust-caked teeth. Around him, the team reloaded with hands that no longer shook. The fear had burned out hours ago, replaced by grim arithmetic, angles, distance, and time. Corporal Reyes watched the ridgeline through a cracked optic. Shadows shifted between the rocks, patient, deliberate. The enemy was closing, guided by sound and certainty. The last mortar impact had blown their SAT relay into the slope, erasing any hope of extraction. The canyon was now their coffin. A voice broke the silence. "Movement east," Cole whispered. Hensley nodded once. "Short bursts only. Make them think we have more ammo than we do." 3 rifles spoke, disciplined and precise. Echoes rolled through the valley, followed by answering fire from unseen angles. A bullet clipped stone near Hensley's cheek, hot fragments slicing his skin. He ignored the blood. Somewhere beyond that ridge lay the forward operating post, 86 kilometers of hostile ground and no signal path. If command even heard their first distress call, it was buried under interference. They were ghosts on the network, already written off. At Fob Kestrel, a comms officer leaned over his console, eyes narrowing at a flicker on the spectrum analyzer. A transmission, faint, degraded, but real. He adjusted frequency, filtering the noise until a voice emerged, warped and distant. "Contact north?" 2 men down. Requesting, then silence, he froze. That call sign was from Sector 7C. The room fell quiet as officers turned toward the map pinned on the wall. Sector 7C had been blacklisted months ago. The last rescue there had ended with a downed bird and 12 casualties. The terrain was a funnel of death, sheer cliffs, shifting winds, heat plumes that blinded senses. They called it the Boneyard. The watch commander spoke softly. "No aircraft in theater is cleared for that corridor." "Then clear one," someone muttered. But nobody moved. Everyone in that tent knew what the Boneyard did to aircraft. 2 drones gone, 1 Kestrel-class jet missing. Even choppers refused the flight plan. Back in the canyon, Hensley checked his men, 1 wounded, 1 pale from blood loss, all silent. The ridge above trembled with the echo of approaching footsteps. He looked skyward, not for rescue, but for witness. And then, through the static, through the weight of impossible odds, a sound began to rise, low, metallic, relentless. The very air vibrated with it. A growl building into a roar that swallowed the mountains. Every man on that ridge lifted his eyes. The Warthog was coming back. The briefing room was dim, the air thick with recycled coffee and tension. A map of the Afghan highlands glowed under red light, marked with lines that told a simple story of impossible terrain. Lieutenant Colonel Briggs pointed at the narrow valley, carved between ridges like a scar. "This is the corridor," he said. "You fly through it once. You do not come back the same." Major Alexandra Hale, call sign Valkyrie, stood in silence, arms folded, her flight suit zipped to the collar. She had flown the A-10 for 9 years, each mission another scar on the same stretch of memory. Her jet was more than metal. It was the only thing that listened when the radio went dead, when men below were minutes from extinction. The objective was clear. Overwatch for SEAL Recon Team Viper. Extraction at dawn. If contact occurred, suppress and cover withdrawal. Nothing in the briefing mentioned the storm warnings or the jamming reports coming from the eastern grid. Nothing mentioned that the Boneyard had already claimed 3 aircraft in as many months. Briggs glanced at her file. "Valkyrie, you know the corridor better than anyone. If they need air, you are the only one I will trust to thread that ridge." She nodded once. Understood. Her voice was steady, stripped of emotion. But inside, she remembered every call that had come too late, every pilot's voice fading into static. The burden of the A-10 pilot was simple and brutal. She carried the lives of men she would never meet. Hours later, the base fell quiet under a bruised sky. Maintenance crews moved like ghosts along the flight line, checking flares and rearming the cannon that gave the Warthog its voice. Hale walked the length of her aircraft, running a hand across the scarred fuselage. The metal was cold, pitted with old burns and new paint. On the nose, someone had scrawled a line from an old poem. No angel ever had wings like these. Inside the cockpit, everything smelled of oil and dust. She slid into the seat, the world narrowing to switches and steel. Through the canopy, the horizon was fading to red. Somewhere beyond it, a team she had never met was holding a ridge that was not supposed to exist on any active map. At the same hour, in that valley, the SEALs were running out of time. Their medic was down. Their leader's voice was cracking under static. The sun had dropped behind the ridges, leaving only the echo of gunfire. Hale's headset crackled, fragments of voices breaking through interference. "Contact north. Request air." Then silence. She froze. The call sign was familiar. Viper 1. The same team marked for her sector. The signal was weak, almost erased by distance. She replayed it twice, her hand tightening around the throttle. The command tower gave no order, no clearance, no guarantee. The corridor was blacklisted, but she had heard them, and when no one else answered, Valkyrie did what she always did. She prepared to fly. Night fell like a closing fist. The temperature dropped fast, turning sweat to ice beneath layers of dust and blood. The SEAL team huddled behind a fractured wall of shale, the last barrier between them and the kill zone beyond. Their world had shrunk to the size of their rifles and the dying light of a single chemstick. Lieutenant Mark Hensley checked his watch. Every minute without contact was another nail in their coffin. The radio was dead again, its battery coughing out static like a dying lung. He had stopped trying to fix it. The enemy's signal jammers were stronger, closer. Somewhere beyond the ridge, they were tightening the circle. Corporal Reyes was pale, his arm wrapped in a bandage that was already turning black. Sergeant Cole crouched near the wall, eyes fixed on the darkness. "Movement," he whispered. "They are waiting for us to bleed out." Hensley did not answer. He could feel the truth in Cole's words. The trap had been perfect. False coordinates, delayed intel, and now the canyon itself was closing on them. The enemy did not need to attack. They only needed to wait. In the stillness, Hensley's mind wandered backward through the noise. Faces flickered in memory. Men from past missions, some alive, most not. He remembered their last pre-dawn briefing before insertion, the quiet confidence in every handshake, every word. He had promised them they would all return. He had meant it. Now that promise burned like a wound that would not close. Another sound broke through the night, a ricochet, a scream, then silence. The wounded man near the wall stopped breathing. The medic checked his pulse, looked up once and shook his head. Hensley exhaled slowly, forcing calm into his voice. "We hold until first light, assuming we see it," Cole muttered. The silence that followed was thicker than fear. Even the wind refused to move. Somewhere beyond the ridge a jackal cried, a sound that almost resembled laughter. At the forward command post, the situation map was a blur of static and fading pings. The operations officer cursed under his breath. "We have lost all telemetry from Sector 7C. A technician looked up. "What about the pilot?" "Valkyrie is still on standby. Fuel window is closing," the officer replied. "If she launches now, she will not have enough to return without mid-air refuel." "She knows the risks," someone said quietly. The room fell silent. Every man in that tent knew what it meant when a pilot launched without guarantee of return. Back in the canyon, Hensley pressed his back against the cold rock, listening to the heartbeat of the earth. Every crack, every whisper of stone felt amplified. He could almost hear the enemy breathing in the dark. He pulled the radio close. One last attempt. "Viper 1 to any station. Any air asset. We are still here." Static answered him, long and empty. Cole turned to him. "No one is coming." Hensley looked toward the ridge, where the sky had turned to black glass. "Someone will," he said softly. "If anyone can reach us, it is her. Engines thundered against the night, rolling through the hangars like a storm that had finally found its purpose. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog, was no beauty, but it was built for vengeance. Its engines howled, its frame rattled with restrained fury, and at its helm sat the woman they called Valkyrie. She moved through pre-flight checks in silence. Every motion was mechanical, deliberate, battery on, flaps tested, hydraulics green. The ground crew gave a single nod. No words were needed. Everyone on that runway knew where she was going and what it meant if she did not return. The command tower's voice crackled through her headset. "Valkyrie, you are cleared hot for immediate departure. Sector 7C coordinates uploaded. Be advised, hostile anti-air confirmed." "Copy," she said. Her tone was flat, but her pulse was not. Somewhere out there, men were dying. Her men. The turbines roared to life. She released the brakes, and the Warthog lunged forward, wheels hammering against tarmac until the earth itself fell away beneath her. The night opened wide, swallowing the sound, but not the intent. Inside the cockpit, the world became a symphony of red lights and shadow. The A-10 climbed hard, then banked left toward the mountains. The moonlight traced the outline of her wings, the twin engines glowing like the eyes of some ancient predator. Command: Valkyrie en route. Estimated 4 minutes to target grid. Be advised, came the reply. No satellite visuals available. You are flying blind, she exhaled slowly. Then I will see for both of us. Below in the valley, the SEALs held their ground. The air was heavy with smoke, gunpowder, and the stench of spent fear. Cole reloaded the last magazine. "Still nothing?" Hensley shook his head. "Nothing but ghosts." Then they heard it. A low hum at first, like the sky holding its breath. It grew deeper, louder, until the very rocks began to tremble. Reyes looked up, blood on his face and disbelief in his eyes. "Tell me that is what I think it is." Hensley smiled just once. She came. The ridge erupted with tracer fire as Valkyrie broke over the horizon. Her A-10 dove low, the engines screaming defiance. The GAU-8 Avenger, 7 barrels of spinning metal, came alive beneath her cockpit. It did not fire bullets. It spat out thunder. Her first pass raked the ridge, rounds sparking across stone and sand, missing the main nest by meters. Alarms screamed in her headset. A missile lock. She broke right, flares streaking behind her like comets. The mountains clawed at her wings. "Adjusting trajectory," she muttered. "One more run." Down below, the SEALs crouched as another wave of fire tore through the valley. The air smelled of ozone and burning metal. Then it came, the second run. The A-10 rolled inverted, dove headlong into the valley, and unleashed a roar that split the night in two. The GAU-8 tore through the enemy lines like a god's hammer. Fire climbed the ridge. The darkness shattered. For the men below, it was not sound. It was salvation. The valley became a crucible of light and sound. The first shells landed with the force of collapsing worlds, shaking the canyon walls until dust cascaded like rain. Flames carved through the darkness, turning enemy silhouettes into brief, vanishing ghosts. Every burst of the GAU-8's fire was a heartbeat, deep, relentless, final. Below, the SEAL team moved in rhythm with that sound. Hensley gave the signal, his voice hoarse but steady. "On me, move now!" They ran through the haze, bullets snapping past their ears, boots crushing stone and ash. The ridge that had been their prison was now a storm of burning metal, and in its chaos lay their only chance to live. Cole dragged Reyes by the collar, shouting something no one could hear over the cannon's thunder. The air itself vibrated. Every round Valkyrie fired split the sky open, punching holes through fortifications that had stood for weeks. The smell of cordite and scorched soil filled their lungs. Above them, Valkyrie's focus was razor-thin. Her world existed between crosshairs and warnings, between faith and flame. The cockpit was a flood of red lights. Fuel low, ammo depleting, system alert, none of it mattered. She leaned into the dive again, voice calm, breath steady. "Command, Valkyrie," making another pass. "Mark targets with smoke." A crackling voice answered, "Smoke deployed." "You are cleared hot," she pulled the trigger. The cannon roared. spitting streams of depleted uranium rounds that tore the ridge apart. The enemy's last line disintegrated beneath the storm. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from the vibration, a constant reminder that she was flying a gun built around an aircraft, not the other way around. Hensley's team reached the lower slope. The extraction beacon flashed weakly through the dust. A helicopter was inbound, slicing through the dawn haze, but it was still minutes away. The SEALs formed a perimeter, firing bursts into the smoke as shapes moved in and out of visibility. Overhead, Valkyrie banked hard. The engines coughed. Fuel was almost gone. She looked once toward the valley, the place that had swallowed every signal, every plea for help, and spoke into the static. Viper 1. This is Valkyrie. You have a path. Move now. Hensley pressed his radio against his ear, unable to tell if she could hear him. Copy that, Valkyrie. We are moving. You saved us. Her voice came through again, soft beneath the distortion. Just doing my part. She made one final climb, the engines straining. The dawn light caught the Warthog's wings, painting them gold against the smoke. For a moment, the sky itself seemed to bow beneath her. Then she was gone, vanishing beyond the ridge as the helicopter descended through the haze. The SEALs looked up through the drifting smoke, listening to the silence that followed. It was heavy, sacred, unreal. Reyes broke it first, whispering through cracked lips, "She flew through hell for us." Hensley nodded once, eyes still on the horizon, and made it look like heaven. Morning came like a whisper over broken ground. Smoke drifted through the valley, where hours earlier there had been only fire and fear. The ridge was silent now. No gunfire, no screams, only the wind moving across scorched stone. The SEAL team sat among the remnants of the battlefield, their faces grey with exhaustion and dust. Victory had come, but it had not come free. Hensley looked toward the horizon where the A-10 had vanished. "She made it out?" he asked. The comms officer nodded faintly. Radar picked her up for a minute. Then nothing, but she cleared the ridge. That was enough. No one spoke after that. Some men prayed. Others simply stared at the sky that had roared for them and now lay quiet, indifferent. Hours later, far from the chaos, the Warthog limped across an empty stretch of desert air. Its fuselage was torn, paint scorched black, panels riddled with shrapnel. Warning lights still glowed on the dashboard, but Valkyrie ignored them. Her voice was gone from shouting, her hands raw from the vibration of the cannon. "Valkyrie, you are clear to land," the tower called out. She guided the wounded jet toward the runway, the engines sputtering as if reluctant to let go of the fight. Wheels hit the ground with a jolt, the aircraft rolling to a slow, uneven halt. When the cockpit opened, no cheer met her, only the distant echo of engines dying and the hum of the desert wind. She climbed down, boots hitting the tarmac, eyes fixed on the horizon she had just come from. Ground crew rushed forward, staring at the damage. Someone whispered, "How did this thing even stay airborne?" She gave no answer. Her thoughts were still with the voices that had filled her headset, voices that had screamed, "Gone silent, then come back to life in the middle of hell." Inside the command tent, officers studied data, calculated losses, wrote commendations. Words like precision, courage, mission success filled the reports. But Valkyrie did not think in numbers. She remembered faces, the ones she had not seen, the ones who had called for her in the dark. To her, the mission was not about targets hit or enemies destroyed. It was about the sound that had risen over that ridge, a scream of defiance that had turned despair into something unbreakable. When night returned, she stood beside the A-10. Mechanics worked quietly under floodlights, patching its wounds with steel. She reached out, running her hand along the battered frame. The metal was cold but alive, a survivor like her. Somewhere out there, the SEALs were heading home. They would tell the story differently. The ground shaking, the sky on fire, the angel in the machine who came when hope was gone. But Valkyrie would never tell it at all. Some stories belong to silence, to the thin air between memory and myth. because sometimes salvation does not arrive in light or words. Sometimes it comes screaming over a ridge, with wings of steel and a human heart behind them.